Hi everyone, we're going to continue with our PCG Graph intro. Just to recap from last video, we made this curve and then we projected the points onto the ground, and then we spawned some blocks that we modified a little bit so they look a little bit more like a path. We added some random values here to the update transform for scale and offset, and a scale and rotation. And then we also deform them so they fit the curve a little bit better around the corners. And then we also have this object here that has the PCG volume monitor on it. So if we went to modify that object, it'll automatically update the graph, and we'll see that our blocks here get projected properly. So now we're just going to move on to a little bit different concept, which would be to use an area rather than a curve. And once again, we can select our PCG manager and we can hit the create button, select an area, and then we'll see our area here in the hierarchy. So we can add points in the same way as the curve, or we could use some of the settings here to quickly create a rectangle. So I can say, okay, create a 50 by 50 rectangle on the XZ plane, which is kind of flat down. And I'll get my plane here. I can also increase the tension if I want a pretty square kind of rectangle. Now I can drag this and I can also disable the fill here so we can see what's going on. We don't necessarily need the fill at this time. And I kind of want to make sure that it's outside of the curve for what I'm going to try to do. All right. And let's create another group here in our PCG graph and call that area. And inside it, we'll add a parameter for the area. And we'll call that vegetation. And drag that in here. And we can see what nodes are available. You can see get points for an area. And connector area here. We see the density takes a vector 2, and it starts with the distribution type random. And we can save this, and in the PCG manager, we have to also drag our area into that parameter. And we don't see anything at this point because we don't have any debug. We just have the points. We could enable the debug onto the points node itself. And we'll see, okay, this is 1910 points. And we have the cubes here created. Or we could use the debug node instead. Sorry, get the points connected here. Okay, and we'll get the same points. We could switch the distribution. There's a few different ones. We have a grid. And this would just be a very square grid. We could change the dimensions here. We also have Poisson and Houghton distributions. One thing I would say is that because there's ways to trim those down later, it's much better to start with a low number of points rather than starting with a very high number of points and then like filtering them out later, just because of the number of calculations. So let me just like turn the debug off here. So I'm going to go back to the PCG manager, turn the debug to none. And so we have our points in here, Let me see, and I'm just going to put it back to random for now. And I have these points. Maybe I want a little bit more. Let's bump this to 2 by 2. Okay, so we can see this a little bit better. Then we have some that are overlapping here, right? Now, if I wanted to spawn vegetation in here, right, we can follow the same example as from the curve, and we can say generate on points, drag our points in here, and we'll add another set, so object set list, and we'll say vegetation, and we'll connect this here. Now, once again, I have some objects prepared, so if I go to the inspector here and I add a new object set, we'll see that I already have some. So I have some here called forest, I have grass. So I can just do the grass and see what happens, right? Okay, so we have some grass over here already spawning. It's a little hard to see. Maybe let me just make this terrain a little bit, the tiling a little bit higher. And so we have some grass. We also see it spawning on top of our tiles. Let's see if I go back here and look at what's in this grass object. So I have a bunch of grass, and then inside the forest, I have some trees here. I have another one that's, let's see, stones, that has a bunch of stones. So what I can do is I can go back to the PC Manager and add 2 more object sets, and I can have another one for the trees and add the stones as well. So now I have 3 in here. And we can see, okay, we have a bunch of those, and we have a lot more stones and grass than trees. And that's because in each of these object sets, you have density, and the density for the trees is very low. And for the stones and the grass, it's pretty high. As you can see, these are close to 1. So whenever they're being used in the generate objects and points, it'll use that density, and you can have a variety of sets with different density, and they will be rolled based on that. So we can adjust that. We can say, okay, we want a little bit more of this tree, and then maybe kind of bump these up a little bit. And we can save this again, and then we'll see, okay, well, now we have a lot more trees. But I don't really like these being on the road. I know here I had this object that my road spawning on top, but the trees are, spawning under it, which is not great. You can also add some material. I had some materials here to this, so it doesn't look that gray. So we can have some proper ground material here. So yeah, I don't really like this. The trees going inside of it. So what we can do is we can have the area up. So I can move this up and project the points down before we generate anything. Same as we did with the curve. So I can have these project points here, and again, the default settings should work fine. I can hit save. Okay, and now we see that we have all of these correctly spawning on top. Now, we could also turn on the align to normal with the trees that might look a little funky. right? So we could handle this separately with trees in general and leave that in a separate project and handle it completely separately from grass and stones and things like that. So it's up to you. I'm just doing this all together just so you can see how those look. But I'm just going to uncheck that for now. And now we can handle the second issue. So as I said, I don't really like these spawning on top of my road. That's not what I want. So let's enable again the debug for my points here. Okay. And I want to essentially exclude the area around the road. And how I can do that is, let me get these again. So I have the get points on curve up here, and then they get projected, right? And I can enable the debug for the points, and I can make these just yellow. And then we can see, okay, this is my road, right? And this is my area points, which is great. Now, what I want to do is I want to sample around the road first. And so I'm going to use this sample points in radius, and we can turn this debug off here. We can add another debug here. And we're just going to plug the projected points into the sample and bump the radius to 3. And then let's see what happens. Okay, so we see we have some points here that are not now being sampled in an area around the curve. That's not enough. And let's see, I might want to just do concentric, which will essentially do um, a, a radius inside, around each of the points. That's a little bit too much. So I might want to reduce the density here, maybe increase the radius a little bit. So let's see how that looks. Okay, so this might do. Okay. So what we're going to do is, let's see, points, operations, and we're going to say subtract points. So we're going to take the projected points from the area, plug them here into the first port, and then we're going to subtract the yellow points that we have here, and then we're going to say we want in 1 meter radius. We want to have everything subtracted. So basically, it's going to subtract from the red points any points that are in 1 meter radius around any of the yellow points. And we can see what that looks like if we plug that in here instead. Okay, and we can see, okay, this is essentially placing a point in each of the points on the red and subtracting everything that is too close to the road. And we could bump this up to 2. And let's see here. Okay, this is a little bit better. And you can see there's nothing on the road anymore, right? Because we now have a 2 meter radius from any of the sampled points around the road. And this will do, and I think this is going to work much better. So then we can use those points instead of the original area points and plug that in here. And then we can just disable the bug for now, the debug, and save. Can disable the other debug as well. Okay, and now we can see there's nothing anymore on our road. And this is an easy way to generate like a forest and a road and make sure everything is spawn oriented correctly, and there is nothing really that's overlapping where we don't want it to.